Today we have a very distinguished guest, an honourable Member Parliament from Liberal Party, Fleetwood Port Kells, Honourable Ken Hardy. Ken, thank you very much and welcome to Sohni Dharti Pakistan.
Well, thank you very much, Sharik. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation.
You're very welcome. And how about New Year? Do you have any new resolution for 2017 or?
Well, on a personal basis, I've had the same resolution now for 50 years. Wow. And that is to make myself as happy as possible.
And you are.
And you are. And that's something over which I have total control.
I think that's the best resolution ever. So hopefully we'll have the same too. So Ken, first of all, in every elections, all the parties make some promises in elections with the public, and your party did too. So can you elaborate something what your party made the promises with the public, and where are you right now, and in terms of the progress?
Well, of course, what happens in an election is you gather up many different promises, and then you have a 4-year span to deliver on them. Yes. So, you know, we've gotten a start, a very good one in many areas. There's some that we haven't gotten to yet, but we will over time. I think that the major things that we've done in the first year has been the tax break for the middle class, okay, which was accompanied by a slight tax increase for the wealthier people. Mm-hmm. As well as the Canada Child Benefit, which is really big. This was a very transformative event, simply because we changed the structure that the previous government had put in place for the Canada Child Benefit. Their child benefit was universal. Everybody got a check. Yeah. What we did was make it income tested, so that the less money you made, the more money you would get.
You get from
and it would be tax free
from federal government.
From the federal government, and it's tax free. Mm-hmm. And even before the election, based on the math, a parliamentary review indicated that this program would lift 300,000 kids out of poverty. That's good. That's something absolutely
because
we
today,
want to do.
When I was coming to the studio, and one of my very good friend, we were talking about the show and today's interview, and I mentioned you, and she said, "Could you please ask him one question? That the living cost and earning gap is huge here, and especially in British Columbia. So what federal government is doing for that? Is there special something for British Columbia, because here the gap is getting bigger and bigger every day."
That's been a problem forever. The Lower Mainland, particularly, has been one of the higher cost places to live, yes, and it is somewhat difficult for the federal government to fine tune a program to the extent that we reflect the living costs in various areas. So certainly something like the Canada Child Benefit will have a larger impact on a family in Kelowna than it will in somebody in Metro Vancouver. We do recognize that, and particularly when it comes to things like housing costs. But then in that respect, what you've noticed now is that the number of units being sold in Metro Vancouver has been dropping, and so has the prices. Now, we don't want those prices to come down precipitously, because you've had people buy into the market when it was at its peak, and we don't want those people to be disadvantaged. But going back to your original question, we have not indexed any of the government benefits, the federal government benefits, according to the cost of living in a particular market. Okay. We will use Canada-wide averages, so we will be indexing, things like the Canada Child Benefit in time, but it'll be based on Canada-wide rather than market-specific across the country.
Okay. One very small question. Across the border to the south, we have a new elect president, and his views about different ethnicities is quite popular, quote unquote. Do you think that will affect any way in our politics, in our Canadian setup?
I think the conditions here are so much different than they are in the United States. I've kind of made it my point to do a deeper dive into what actually happened in the United States, and I think that if you strip away all of the kind of outrageous things that were being reported in the media, Donald Trump actually ran on the same platform that Canada's Liberals ran on. Excuse me. You know, it was a matter of reflecting on the fact that the middle class was feeling left out.
Okay.
They hadn't had a decent pay increase for a long time.
That's right.
It didn't seem that the economy was benefiting the middle class to the degree
It was
should
basically
have.
the economy which.
So it was
attracted.
basically the economy. And in those conditions, unfortunately, you can have situations where then people start looking for somebody to blame. And it's easy to identify somebody who's different than you and blame them.
Mm-hmm.
We don't play that game here in Canada. I mean, we rejected that kind of politics a year and a few months ago.
Yes,
you know,
we saw that. Yep.
The other thing, and this I think is even more key, Canada is not likely to want to make the same turn that the United States did because we need immigrants here. We need more people. You know, it wasn't, maybe 15 or 20 years ago that for every retired person in Canada, we had 4 people who were working. Now the ratio is 2 to 1.
Wow.
We have a demographic issue in Canada that can only be addressed by bringing more people into the country. This is why, we're going to maintain immigration levels at about 300,000 a year. We're going to maybe do a bit of a shift toward, the economic and the family reunification in order to ensure that, we have people coming into the country who are prepared to work or prepared to start businesses, but at the same time also bolster the families that are already here. Because a family with a good foundation, with the mom and dad here to help look after the kids, means that the younger mom and dad can go out and work and contribute to the economy. So over and above just simply being nice people, like we are in Canada, we have a good, solid economic reason for taking a much different view of things than you might see in the United States.
That's fantastic. Let's move to a little bit different. I interviewed Honorable Justin Trudeau a year back, probably, and I asked him about Pakistan, and especially the war on terrorism. Pakistan has lost over 90,000 innocent people and over $120 billion lost in economy, whereas it's not a big economy as compared to these big countries. And in this fight, and yet our Canadian and Western friends asked Pakistan to do more always. And when I asked him a question, instead of answering straightforward, he talked about the human rights issues and how we deal in Pakistan with the minorities and stuff like that. What do you think? How important the human rights issues are in our Canadian politics or Canadian foreign policy?
Well, human rights issues are really important because basically it kind of demonstrates what fundamentals are there in a society. Excuse me. And is a society in a position where it's prepared to give all of the people participating in that society an equal chance to prosper?
That's right.
Okay? That's important because that will allow a society and an economy to perform at an optimum level. Mm-hmm. It also diminishes the kind of dislocation, the disaffection that will occur when we don't have proper human rights. Canada is not blameless in this. This is why our government has spent so much time and is spending so much money trying to basically rehabilitate a century-old difficulty that we've had with our First Nations. They represent an amazingly strong potential for this country, both socially and economically, and we have not allowed them to do that. So this is why domestically we're saying that we have to go through a whole process of reconciliation with our First Nations. And what's good for us should be good for other countries too that we speak
That's
with.
right.
So, if we talk to Russia, if we talk to China, if we talk to Pakistan, if we talk to the United States, all of these areas are places where we can't, point the finger at them and give them the holier-than-thou look, because our record isn't totally clean.
That's right.
But at the same time,
but Pakistan,
we're putting
I
an effort in.
Yes.
We're putting an effort in. And where we see the effort also happening are areas where we'll say, you know what, we'd like to work with you to move that along.
Pakistan's, I think, track record about the minorities and then human rights issues is not that bad. Yes, we have problem, but it is mainly because of that terrorism wave which is killing everybody. It's not discriminating between the minorities or the others. But don't you think, like right now, when I was looking at the numbers, but we have promised that I'm not going to go in the numbers. I don't like numbers. But trade with Pakistan, Canada and Pakistan, is not in billions. It's in millions. So do you think that we need to work closely with the Pakistanis? And now there's a huge change is happening right now due to China-Pakistan economic corridor. It will be a big economic activity happening there. Yet we have no good business relationship with Pakistan. So do you think we should do some more?
Well, I do, absolutely. And I think if there was ever a catalyst for making that happen, it's certainly the sense of more protectionism from the United States. The fact that we just signed, we completed work that the Conservatives had moved along quite nicely on a trade agreement with Europe. And we finally got that over the finish line. It had to be rescued, but it was done. And it was a moment of satisfaction for both Ed Fast, the former minister, and Chrystia Freeland, our minister. When it comes to Pakistan, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely, potential there. And now more than ever an opportunity to try and realize that potential, because if the United States becomes more protectionist, then countries all over the world that have done business with the United States may find themselves looking for new partners.
That's right. That's right. Talking about same human rights issue, in Indian held Kashmir, more than 6,000 people are injured. Over 2,000 people lost their sight. And it's been, I think, more than 5 months that they have curfew in that valley. No United Nations can go there, like no access to the human rights organizations, no access to the media. And yet I haven't read any statement from our parliament, from our Liberal government, or any politician in Canada. Do you think that's not important to talk about that human rights issue? It's a huge problem.
Well, the way you describe it, it sounds like it, but I have to admit I haven't heard that either. Now, wow. One of the things that I do have, if you like, the advantage is that on a day-to-day basis when I'm in Ottawa, I will have an opportunity to speak to our foreign affairs people. Okay. And so what I can say to you now is that when I get back to Ottawa and when the House is back in session at the end of January, I'll ask them about this, and I'll let you know what I hear.
That's very important because, over, as I earlier mentioned, over 200 days curfew. And curfew, if you understand the term, is that where you cannot go out from your home. Yeah. If you go out, military has a special protection that even if they kill whole family, nobody can ask them any question. And I was thinking that to ask you, the terrorism's base is extremism. It comes from extremism, and extremism comes when people have no access to the law. People cannot go to the police. There is no, the freedom and no justice, at least. Like, I was reading an article from Kashmir, and it says that they killed 12 years old kid, and in the funeral, they killed 20 more, because why they were gathered there in funeral. So this kind of activities can generate a huge problem in that region.
Well, I can't comment because I'm unaware of any of these episodes. What I can say, though, is that the roots of terrorism are something that I know our party during the election campaign said we needed to spend more time to understand this. And we were criticized by the Conservatives for saying that. The response from the Prime Minister of the day is, well, we don't do sociology. Well, I'm sorry, we have to do sociology.
That's
the roots of extremism usually come, as you suggested, when people do not feel any hope. And when we look at kind of the big picture issue of the economics around the world, we see many, many places where people are not benefiting fairly in the economic wealth that their country or their region is generating. And that's one area where extremism can definitely take root. I think you'll see that in the coming year, we're going to have to make some very difficult decisions in Canada about the role that we play on the world stage in dealing with extremism. And we are a relatively small country here.
That's right.
And resources being limited as they are, it will still not stop us from trying to go in and deal with some of the root causes. Now, I don't know if some of this will apply to Kashmir, to Pakistan, or wherever.
That's right.
But what I can tell you is that in spite of the fact that there are some who criticize Canada for its foreign aid program, for the fact that we're helping countries deal with climate change, countries that would like to grow their economy but are being held back by climate change difficulties, we need to help them out. We also need to provide hope, education, health care, a lot of things that will lift a population up, especially young people. In Canada itself, I think that one of our benefits is that because we have such a diverse population here, and we have people like yourself, we have people like Cameron Bajwa in my office, or people like Bilal Chima, who's head of the Liberal Riding Association, or good people like Dr. Mohammed Tariq, the consul here, who's a very fine gentleman. These are all links that have the potential to go back to Pakistan and help, either directly or indirectly. I've attended fundraisers for hospitals and things that will actually lift the quality of life there. We know, as a government, that if we address some of those things, we are going to make, especially the young people, a harder target for terrorism, a harder target for radicalization. Here at home, in our last budget, we actually included an amount for a new office of counter-radicalization to ensure that the people who come to Canada who are, let's say, being contaminated by some of the things that are going on back home, have somebody that they can talk to so that we can ensure that our situation here is solid. And when that's solid, then we'll look to people from those countries to go back and make things better.
Our community is very aware and I think very active. And I think we believe that this is our homeland, and we have to protect it in any case. There's no ifs and buts.
And I know you're the interviewer, but I guess, as a member of that community, what do you see, the community doing back home, back in the mother country, to make things better there? Because, as you create those ideas, right, you come up with a germ of something that could work. This is where a government like the federal government or the provincial government or charitable organizations are quite often prepared to put money and effort behind it to help you help the folks back home.
That's right. Ken, the last thing which I want to mention is that the way back, Brenda Locke, one of our friends, she asked me once a question. She said, you came from Pakistan and now your homeland is Canada. And what if, God forbid, something happened with Canada and Pakistan, where you will be? Like, you'll be siding Pakistan or Canada. And I told her that I have two sons. And up till now, I haven't thought that if, God forbid, something happened in between two, whom I'm going to side. I think I'll be standing in between and making them together to understand that these are our two sons, like they are our kids, and these are our countries. We love them both, and I think this is how our community think about Canada.
Good for you.
Definitely.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. See, that's what Canadians do.
Yes.
Good for you.
Yeah, we are proud. We are proud Canadian. We are proud Pakistanis. Thank you very much, Ken, once again.
Thank you.
And definitely we'll meet you again.
Thank you.